All right. Thank you, Sarah. So looking at the Supporting Transformation to Empower People initiative, I want to talk briefly about the number of transformation plans that the department has received and approved to date. I don't think that number has really fluctuated much since the last time we met in September. We currently have 21 private provider agencies that have approved STEP transformation plans that range in size, specifically the number of individuals incorporated in those plans. We're going to get an opportunity today to look briefly at one of our most recently approved transformation plans from Resources for Human Development. It's one of our smallest plans. They focus on moving one individual from a CRS to their own home. And then we've looked in the past at some of our larger plans, specifically Kennedy Collective, who is doing a lot of work around moving upwards of 40 individuals towards more independent employment settings within their communities. So a broad range of transformation plans. We've seen plans that focus specifically on day and employment transitions. We've seen plans that focus specifically on residential transitions. And then there are a number that focus on a blend of both day and employment and residential. So again, 21 private providers have submitted and had their plans approved. I think the one outstanding plan is Eastern Community Development Corporation, commonly referred to as ECDC. They submitted their plan to the South Region. Our resource administrator and his team, David, are currently reviewing that plan, and we hope to get that approved by the end of the year. I did say in the beginning that the most recently approved plan, it was out of the West, Resources for Human Development, rather small plan. But I think what matters here in the conversation that I've had when I've talked about RHD's plan is we got the provider at the table. They're participating in this work. They're participating in the discussion. And I think that's what's kind of important, right? When you look at the STEP initiative, I think there are a lot of lessons learned for our department, specifically when it comes to communication, right? I think when we came to the table, when we first stood this thing up, we kind of, and I don't know if I've said this in the past, but I told you guys that I would come to these meetings and have open and kind of candid conversations with you. When we came to the table, when we first stood Step Up, I think we touted it as this kind of transformational, innovative initiative. And the feedback that we heard from providers was more or less, hey, you guys are here talking about spotlighting transitions from classic congregate settings to more community-based supports. We've been doing this for a number of years. This isn't something that's really innovative. It's important work. But I think I realized and others within our department realized that we didn't really get our messaging quite right there. There were a few things, a few positives that I think came out of this initiative, right? When you look at the way, and again, tied to communications, I don't think historically our department has really been an innovator in the way in which we communicate the different services that are available to our, the individuals and families that we support. I think a lot of our communication material can be fairly dry, fairly lengthy. And one of the things that we were kind of able to shape through the ARPA period and with the STEP initiative was kind of innovative ways to communicate to individuals and families about some of the more progressive support options that we were highlighting through STEP. So if you take a look at our website, and I know I've shared these with you in the past, you may have seen communications come out on them from Commissioner Sheff and others. We developed the STEP video series that helps to highlight the impact that some of these progressive supports have on the individuals who have utilized them. We developed one-pagers that provide more or less a family-friendly approach, a synopsis of the kind of functionality of some of the individual supports, again, that we're highlighting through this initiative. And I think that has helped the department change the way in which it's communicating the availability of different supports to individuals and families. If you guys want to take a closer look at that, I know some of that work is still kind of evolving. You can check out the ct.gov/step website. I think we're getting ready to roll out another assistive technology video that focuses on a young woman who has various disabilities. She's nonverbal, and she's since transitioned from her mother's home to her own apartment in a supportive housing complex in Orange, Connecticut. So that video helps highlight how assistive technology has kind of enabled her to live more independently in her community. So some lessons learned when it came to communications around STEP, and then you also have some positives that kind of came out of that work. One of the communication vehicles that we developed as a part of this initiative, you guys have seen it plenty of times, and I'm going to run through this quickly, is the approved provider approaches document that kind of provides a helpful overview of each of our transformation plans, how many individuals are incorporated within that plan, where they're coming from and where they're moving to, and then how that provider agency plans to support those individuals. So I talked about one of the most recent plans having been approved being resources for human development. So let's click on that. We'll come down and take a quick look at how they're supporting one individual who, again, is moving from a CRS to their own apartment where they're going to utilize some IHS services. So highlighting on the right-hand side there, you got three kind of unique approaches. Well, not unique. I think we've seen these in different provider approaches to supporting transitions. But up in the top right-hand corner there, you got enhanced independence through AT. So I think a number of providers, I know Barry on the call, Oak Hill's doing a lot of work in this space. This agency is prioritizing assistive tech to help the individual manage medications independently, and they're also going to be utilizing assistive technology assessments to get a better understanding of what particular pieces of technology can better support that individual as they move to that more independent location. Number two, again, something we've seen kind of across the board, regular team meetings for transition support. This is something that the department really stressed as being critical when it comes to supporting individuals before, during, and after that transition period. I don't think this is anything new for providers, case managers, or those support teams. I think a lot of folks have an understanding that in order for anyone, regardless of if you have an intellectual disability or not, to be successful in a new environment, you got to have the proper support. So RHD is building in regular team meetings to get an understanding of those blind spots as that individual moves into that more independent setting, and where they can kind of pivot to meet any unmet needs there. And then three, again, just kind of a synopsis of this individual's kind of lifelong goal to live independently. This person, I think for a number of years, and I don't believe the reasons were immediately clear to the department, but this individual for a number of years had this kind of goal of living more independently, right? They wanted to leave their CRS. They wanted to live independently in their own apartment. And this kind of third piece here just provides a synopsis of, RHD in conjunction with the case manager and other support staff are now going to be able to support that individual and make that kind of that lifelong goal a reality for this person. And I think even if you're submitting a plan that's going to help support one individual to move to a more community-based setting, that's important. It doesn't, there's no difference between this plan and Kennedy Collective. Each of them, I think, is looking to execute an important task there. So wanted to share that with all of you. When it comes to so we talked about the number of approved plans. We got to take a look at resources for human development and how they're supporting an individual transition. I want to talk briefly about the number of individuals who have supported, have transitioned successfully as a part of this initiative. I think the last time we had an opportunity to meet, we were somewhere in the kind of 50-ish range. I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I want to say we were somewhere within the 50 range. As of today, there are 65 individuals who have moved to more independent day and employment and residential settings. Now, in meetings past, I have talked about some of the initial targets for transitions that were set out at the beginning of the STEP period, right? My predecessor, Peter Mason, I don't know what magic he was doing to kind of pull these numbers, but he had planned for 200 day and employment transitions and 100 residential transitions at the end of this thing. I think, at this point in time, we realize we're not going to hit those targets, and we've kind of adjusted, right? I think at the beginning of the new year, we're at 65 now. I think at the beginning of the new year, it would be great if the department could be right around 75 individuals having been successfully placed through this initiative. And then what we're looking at moving forward is at the end of the ARPA period, having over 100 individuals having been successfully moved under the STEP initiative. Um, I've said this before. I don't think numbers are incredibly important. I do think they speak to the success, or I do think they speak a little bit to the success or lack thereof that the department had with this initiative. And I think if we had a little bit more runway, right? If the ARPA period wasn't closing down in beginning of 2025, I think providers would have a little bit more time to properly support and execute the total number of transitions that are incorporated within those transformation plans. I think that's kind of the biggest hurdle that the department ran into. A majority of our transformation plans, right, those 21 plans that we talked about, were submitted from, I would say, mid, and Keith, feel free to correct me if I'm way off on this, but I would say mid 2023 to September of this year. Um, And when you're talking about transitioning somebody to a new independent support and all the work and nuances and questions and unknowns that are kind of incorporated into that transition, I don't think 6 months to a year is really adequate time to allow for providers to support all the folks that were kind of encompassed within those transformation plans. Um, I think that's rather unfortunate. But again, we've kind of adjusted our targets here. I think 75 individuals started the new year, and then right down by the end of the ARPA period, if we could say, hey, as a part of this initiative, we helped to highlight successful transitions of over 100 individuals. I think, that would be a win for the department. Again, there's going to be, I think, some good communication material that comes out of this. I do think before the department rolled out the STEP initiative, it was hard for folks who maybe didn't interact with our department on a daily basis, whether that be the legislature or the general public, to get an understanding of all the work that goes in to supporting the individuals and families who look to our department and our private provider agencies for services. I think the communication materials that we've been able to develop as a part of this initiative, whether it's those one pagers, the video series, the document that I was able to just show you, or just some of these general success stories about folks who have transitioned to more independent settings, are going to be of use not only to those within our department and your private provider agencies, but again, those external stakeholders like families and the legislature and those who maybe don't have a broad understanding of the work that goes into supporting the IDD community. So just kind of recapping for myself here, we talked about transformation plans. We talked about the number of individuals that we've supported move into more independent settings. When it comes to the broader ARPA project, right? Our department pursued a number of different initiatives and projects. There are lessons learned and kind of wins and losses, so to speak, associated with each of those. Over the past 2 to 3 years, the department has spent $78.6 million in trying to move our service delivery system forward, trying to stabilize our private provider agencies as you guys were coming out of the pandemic and dealing with a staffing crisis and dealing with, a number of other complexities. So big picture. And I think as our department approaches legislative session, there'll be more conversations that are had around how the department specifically expensed some of those dollars. But again, $78.6 million was spent on initiatives like STEP, on provider stabilization payments, and other proactive approaches to supporting the community at large. So wanted to kind of paint with a broad brush there, give you a little bit of a big picture. What I will say is if there are questions around, and I guess I'm kind of inviting them here, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if I can tell you, if you're curious about some of the dollars that the department, I don't want to say is anticipating we're not going to spend, but we're kind of rapidly approaching the end of the ARPA period, right? There is some of that federal money that we need to kind of spend before the federal government comes down and says, hey, we're taking it back. I will tell you the department does not plan to return any money. We have a document, and I'm going to make this kind of very brief. We have a document that's more or less a spend plan. And we submit initiatives within that spend plan. We send it up to CMS and they approve initiatives for us to funnel some of those federal dollars through. Now, there is a little bit of money that the department has that, if we choose to do nothing with, it will go back to the federal government. So the department over the past couple of months has developed 2 additional initiatives that we placed within that spend plan. We sent it up to CMS. CMS is looking to review and approve that. Those particular initiatives focus on funneling those additional federal dollars to private providers in 2 unique areas. Now, I can't get into too much detail there. What I will tell you is our Chief Financial Officer, Nicholas Gerard, and Commissioner Sheff are planning on attending an alliance meeting that I believe is scheduled for this Thursday, in which they're going to talk at a high level on what those 2 initiatives may focus on. And then once we gain approval from CMS and we can actually funnel some of that federal money through those 2 initiatives, there will obviously be more detailed conversations there as to what the focus point will be. But I think that wraps up the kind of topics that I wanted to cover with all you, right? We talked about STEP, we talked about ARPA, painted with a little bit of a broader brush there. I don't know. I know we have other things on the agenda. I don't know if anyone has questions, comments, general discussion topics that you want to bring up at this point in relation to some of the material I just covered. Shannon, so you got your hand up.
Sure. It's more of a comment. I just want to say that, I think that through the money that we got and through the vision that was sort of laid out, that there has been a lot of transformation in the service delivery system. I think that there are options that exist that didn't exist before. Maybe it wasn't everything that we hoped it would be. Maybe we wish that more providers had been in a position to take advantage of those transformation dollars and to use those dollars to transform their service delivery. However, I think that we are in a much different place now than we were 3 years ago in terms of expectations and what people are looking for and what's available to people. And I think that that's a good thing. I think we needed that in this system. And I don't know that we would have been able to achieve that without the ARPA dollars. Obviously, it didn't solve all the problems. It hasn't solved the staffing crisis, which in my opinion really is just putting such a chokehold on everything right now that it's hard to feel like we can celebrate. And yet I do, because, as somebody who's an advocate and a family member, I appreciate the fact that people have more options now than they did 3 years ago. And that is a good thing. It is a very good thing. So thank you for your efforts. Keith, thank you so much. I'm going to miss you tremendously. And I'm so sorry that we haven't been able to spend any time in person in the past year and a half because the office is closed. And thank you too, Sarah.
Gunnar Abrahamson, DDS ARPA project manager. Thank you, Shannon. And as part of today's agenda, we are going to get to a few retirements of some of the committee members who in the new year will be stepping down from both state service and service to private provider agencies. So we will get to that in a little bit here. One of the topics that I think is kind of new and exciting, and again, I think this is something where private provider agencies were really the ones doing this from the get-go. I don't know how much bosses will appreciate me saying this, but I think private providers were the ones who kind of started this work, and the state is now getting on board. We have a new kind of program or initiative, if you will, called Reimagining Day, where we are building in more employment focused kind of options for individuals who find themselves in DSOs, or for individuals who have part or full-time employment who need to kind of brush up on some of the basics. I know my colleague Sarah Olominick has been doing a lot of work there supporting our employment and day services unit around rolling that initiative out. We have 16 providers who have come to the table and want to participate in that. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to give a brief overview of EEO and EES.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sarah Olominick, ARPA Planning Manager. I imagine a lot of you are already pretty familiar with I know we've had a lot of Reimagining Day materials going out, and I think Gunner's overview of those two program types were great. I think what I would highlight is that we were really able to utilize STEP to support this work. We were able to make participation in EEO or EES eligible under those restructuring incentives for the step plans. And so we've seen a lot of interest in that. And so Gunnar, I think maybe you mentioned we've had 16 requests to add on EEO or EES or both to an existing DSO with different providers, some of them looking at multiple sites, and some of those are already approved, and a lot of those are still kind of in those final stages of the review process, and we're hoping to get those approved to start by the end of the new year. So we're excited to be able just to showcase work that in many cases has been going on for a long time, right? But there wasn't a formal designation. There wasn't really a way to demonstrate this is how we're providing the service. And this is kind of, we know there's this rationale for providing the service in this way. And so it's that extra component of tracking. It's going to help us demonstrate success, hopefully, of those initiatives in the long run, to be able to see who are the folks that are benefiting from this, and how is this empowering them on their particular employment journey and their own trajectory. So we're so thankful for all of the work that went into really formalizing and outlining those service options, all of the providers that put in the work to define those plans, and go through that process. And we're thankful that we were able, again, to bring this under STEP and really provide an incentive for doing that important work. So we hope to, release some more updates as more providers become qualified for that service. But we just wanted to update you that that's been something we were able to work into the STEP process here as we're nearing the end.
Thanks, Sarah. Gunnar Abrahamson, DDS ARPA project coordinator. Sarah, a couple questions for you, and it's really for me. I know oftentimes I've kind of gotten these two mixed up in my head. So you have EEO, which I know the state loves to throw around a bunch of acronyms. Everything we develop, there's got to be a handful of acronyms at least, involved in the description or the title, what have you. So EEO is employment. What does it stand for
Employment
again?
exploration option. So yeah, so
Okay.
there were kind of those two. I can do the little overview. There were those two groups of folks that were identified that were maybe struggling a little bit with our current availability of day services. And one of those groups was folks who were currently in a DSO and were interested in transitioning more towards employment focused services. But we're finding that next step to be a little bit too big of a jump. And so it was those services that are focused on foundational employment skills, foundational exposure to an employment environment, but still provided within kind of a safe, structured space that would feel familiar to that person. So that's EEO. And then EES, I believe, is employment enrichment services, I think is the S. And that's for people who are currently employed and needed that kind of extra peer support to maintain or build employment social skills, folks who are looking to either kind of thrive more within their current position, or maybe interested in making a career transition, looking for some other type of work and not quite sure how to get there, how to do that. So two different services targeted at different groups, but both focused on supporting people to find an employment or day option that's best for them.
Gunnar Abrahamson from DDS. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah is not retiring today, but I want to give a big shout out to her. She has played a critical role in the continued rollout of ARPA and STEP and a number of other initiatives that our department has pursued over the past couple of years. And I can't tell you, she probably gets annoyed. I can't tell you how many times a day I call Sarah for reminders about things like that. What does this acronym mean? How should I explain this to this group? I I'll use that as a transitionary piece to this retirements part of today's agenda, because there are a lot of folks on this committee, a couple of which I'm going to mention here in a minute, that have played a pretty big role both in and outside of DDS in supporting the IDD community in our state. I know one of the folks that I was going to mention today is not on the call, but I believe Wynn Everett is set to step down as the executive director of the ARC Connecticut. Shannon, do you know when that is effective?
I'm not sure, but I think it's at the end of this month.
Okay. All right.
Hi,
So just
folks. It's Kathleen from the ARC Eastern Connecticut. I'm on the hiring committee, and Wynn is retiring, and the search is going on now. And I believe Shannon's correct that people are hoping to have someone in place by the beginning of the year. And really, if you know of anyone who's got an interest in advocacy work, please recommend them to us. Kathleen Stout for the ARC Eastern Connecticut.
Gunnar Abrahamson, starting to lose my voice here, DDS project coordinator, ARPA project coordinator. Thank you for that information, Kathleen and Shannon. So just wanted to note that for the group, if you have a little bit of time. I know how much Wynn has meant to the community, and I know how much he has contributed to this committee. So I'm sure well wishes would be welcome. The other member of this committee that is set to step down as the chief executive officer of her agency at the end of this year is Tracy Walker. Now, I have not known Tracy long. I think the only time that we worked together has been as chair and co-chair of this committee. But I had the opportunity a few months ago to go to Lenny and Joe's Fishtail in I think Westbrook, Connecticut. It was the first time I'd been there since I was a young boy, so it was good to get back and order my fried clam strips and what have you. But in talking with Tracy, it was immediately apparent to me what an advocate she was for not only the folks that she supports through her agency Journey Found, but the broader community at large. And much like Wynn and other folks on this committee, there's no one I'd rather have at the table to be engaging in these conversations and these discussions than folks like Tracy and folks like Wynn and the rest of you. So Tracy, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done over the years, your participation on this committee. I don't know if you want to say a few words.
Just thank you. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, many of you again, many of you like Keith and Barry for decades. And I'm semi-retiring. I'm retiring from Journey Found, but I'm still writing what that next chapter will be. So, you know, who knows where I'll be popping up next, but I'm sure I'll be adding my voice to some advocacy efforts someplace within the state.
Gunnar Abrahamson, DDS ARPA project coordinator. Thank you, Tracy. The last member of this committee that I want to give a shout out to, and I see him smiling, is my friend and colleague, Keith Lavalette. I've known Keith now for a couple of years. When I was in central office and we still had a central office. For those of you who don't know, central office flooded, I think last summer. And we all know the state, it's taken them a little bit of time. It's taken them a long time to kind of get that office back on track to where DDS employees can be going in there in person. But, Keith used to stop by my office. I used to stop by Keith's office on a daily basis to conversate about all different sorts of stuff, his time in college sports and, his love of golf and things like that. So Keith has played a critical role in helping myself and Sarah kind of navigate the complexities of being kind of newly minted project managers, right? There were a lot of nuances to the things that we were doing with ARPA and STEP. And Keith has, much like a lot of folks on this call, years, if not decades of experience in the private provider world and then state government. So he was a real soundboard for Sarah and I. And in times when I'd be kind of pulling my hair out, Keith would provide kind of an even keeled approach to decision making. So Keith, can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And I know you're not a big public speaker, but you want to say a few words?
Sure. Well, thank you, Gunnar. I appreciate all the words, kind words, and it really has been a nice ending to my career working with the individuals in this group and the different state people, and working with Gunnar and Sarah has just been a tremendous opportunity for me, and I've really enjoyed these last few years. And it also got working with Tracy. I spent 20 some odd years in Manchester, and Tracy was part of that group in Manchester with Jordan and Peter Mason early on. And it's kind of nice to end and with you guys. So I really appreciate the time and the work we've done. So
Gunnar Abrahamson, ARPA project coordinator. Thank you, Keith. I'll have one last opportunity to see Keith. We're going to be going to the central office holiday party this Friday, so looking forward to that. That's all we have for some of the kind of core agenda items that we wanted to move through. I'm glad we got some time to thank some of the members of the committee that will be retiring. What we'll do now is move to committee. I know we've only been in this meeting for about 35 minutes. I think that's a little unusual for the advisory committee, but we're moving into committee open discussion items. This is an opportunity. If you guys have anything you want to raise for discussion, feel free to do so. Again, use that raise hand function, come off mute. But give you a minute, give 30 seconds, minute, think about anything if you want to bring it up. All right. Hearing nothing, I think we can move towards adjourning this meeting. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, what I do want to say is thank you for all the work that you have done in helping to kind of guide the department in the decision-making process when it came to different facets of the rollout of the American Rescue Plan Act initiative. You guys have played kind of a core role in helping this move forward. So I want to thank you. We will keep you updated. I think as committee members, we owe you that. While we're not going to be meeting in 2025, right? This is the last iteration of the ARPA Advisory Committee. If there's any kind of pertinent information that needs to go out to this group, you can expect to get an email from myself or my colleague, Sarah, just notifying you of where we're at. You can expect that through the end of the ARPA period. Let's call it like a bi-monthly basis, right? We'll provide you with some updates as to what's going on. So that's my promise to you. Again, thank you for all the work that you've done. On that note, do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Heather, seconded by Shannon Giacovino. That's it, everybody. Again, thanks for your participation. Hope you have a great holiday and a happy new year.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.